This is a global Keeler Marco SL-B2. There's another video that gives an overview of access points to various components. But today we're going to go a little bit deeper into the slit mechanism. And we're going to take the slit assembly out of this older Keeler slit lamp, which should be fairly similar to the current SL-B2 model of today. We're going to be using all these tools to open up the halves, the two halves of the slit assembly. You'll need all these snap ring pliers. This is going to be an important piece that you'll need a 0.9 millimeter or 0.035 millimeter Allen wrench to take off the bezel. So you're definitely going to need one of those, and then the other Allens. We're going to be taking off the knobs and the screws, and if you look at the other videos, you'll be reminded of how these are all used to take off the knobs. Remember to take the knobs off. First you've got to take off the cover and put something to protect the knob while you're holding it, and whatever screw is in here to take that off, by holding it and unscrewing it, then you can take off all your knobs. These are Phillips. So we're going to take off all the knobs. And remember, when you put them back on, you've got to leave a little space between the casing shell and the knob so it doesn't rub. And you're going to use that. Remember that. Okay, once you've got the knobs off, you're not going to be able, and there's two Allen screws here that you've got to take out. Remember that. Now, to be able to open this up, you're going to have to remove this, they call it a bezel ring. You're going to have to remove that, and that's where your 0.9 millimeter, 0.035 Allen wrench is going to come into play. There's some screws around it. You've got to loosen them so that you can lift that ring up to be able to open up the halves. Okay. So yeah, that's you're going to have to do that, or else you won't be able to get to it. And then you have access to viewing what's going on in the slit assembly. And you'll see that here's the knob axle, and it's turning, and this little part here is like a little cam, and it's pushing this lever up, this cradle, and this cradle is pushing up on the slit assembly to open up the slits. So this is like a Zeiss style. Zeiss SL-130 uses the same similar cradle cam mechanism. So that's what's opening up the slits. It's possible that this screw may have gotten loose and your cam is loose. It's not responsive. So if that's your issue, you might want to address that. If we need to address something with the slits to adjust them in case they're really out, well, we may have to pull out the whole slit assembly. And so we're going to have to, there's two Allen screws under here that are holding the whole assembly in. They're going to have to come out. So we're just going to go ahead and take this whole arm off, turn it over, and unloosen those screws. You should already know about The newer models have a screw, a spring, and a bearing in there that will have to be removed, otherwise you'll lose them. But this older model didn't have that. All it had was the snap ring. So we're going to have to take that off. So under here, we're going to have to loosen these two screws, these two bigger hex screws, to be able to pull the whole assembly out. Once we've loosened those screws or taken them out, we're also going to have to remove the LED cap and cable harness, because the cable is going to go with the slit assembly. With everything taken off, we can now pull the slit assembly out of the arm. It should come out. The cable's coming with it because we still have the LED assembly connected. Pull that out. And now we have this aspect. And now we have this. And to pull the slit assembly out of here, out of this casing, we're going to need to release the tension spring and bearing that's in here, because it's in here to detent the assembly. So here's your rotating aspect. It's got a little gear on here. And also we're going to have to move this gear over to the side out of the teeth so that we can pull the inside out. So there's a little Allen screw, lock screw, and you might want to mark right where that gear was so that you can replace it back where it was. There's going to be a little mark on the shaft, so if you don't quite remember, there should be a mark. When you take the screw out, you can view that little mark and then put it right back there. But yeah, we're going to have to move that, slide that over as much as we can, and take out the spring and the bearing out of here. Don't lose that spring, and you can pull the bearing out if you have something magnetic. I think that's a 3mm bearing if you lose it. Now we've removed the tension bearing. Now we've got to loosen our gear. I've already marked it on both sides. And I also took a razor blade and made a scratch mark on each side. You can see there's a flat part in here. That's where it's going to, the screw is going to go into the flat part of the axle. We're going to take it out, but only because I might lose it if I don't. Save that. Now we can move the gear over. That's about as much as you're going to be able to move it. But it gets it out of the corresponding teeth on the slit assembly. So if that's out of the way, and that's out of the way, Now we need to remove these two screws up here. On this one, they're Phillips. Okay, we should be able to pull that up straight out now. And now this is still intact. As you can see, your diaphragm is down there, and your lights LED assembly is shining through. I'm going to put this to the side around here, but examine this part of it. Again, you see this cam. See how it looks like a half moon. And this pin here stops right at the back of the cradle. So that's what's going on if you're curious how that happens. And so this is the little cradle. And on the Zeiss, I think you can pull that cradle completely out, but this one you can't. So that is moving up and down. The cradle is lifting something up. Well, what is it lifting up? Well, we look inside and see there's two pins. They're going through here, and there's two pins sticking out. And when we're turning our slit assembly, those pins are moving up and down also. So that's what's happening. When you're turning the cradle, it's moving those pins. And the bottom of this slit assembly is resting on those pins that are sticking out. And when we turn our knob, that cam is pushing the cradle, and the cradle pushing on this, and it pushes the bottom of the slit assembly, and that's going to open up the slits. So as the pins push up the edge, it's going to open up the slits. As I'm pushing that way, the slits are opening. So that's what's going on if you wanted to know what was going on. Now we have access to the slits, and you can either shine a light through, reverse through the prism to see if you have a gap in there, if that's what you're trying to correct. And I would do only one side. Try to determine which one can move over, and try to only move just one blade. Don't loosen both, because you won't get it right. See, there's a space in here, and that space needs to be maintained. If you loosen both of them, you might lose that space. So that's an important space. So what you might want to do is find out where the gap is and just loosen that one screw, and then get your pliers and try to squeeze it tight and see if that closes your gap. Hopefully it'll be something simple, and hopefully you won't have that issue at all, but you might. So, and then you can clean your slits. You can clean your slits, keep them open, and get your cotton swab with some acetone and just run between them. Now on this one, if this turns, it won't operate anymore. So if that happens to you, just pull out a little bit on this, pull it out, and center your slits back. So when they're centered, then your mechanism can work again. but it has to be centered. So I'm going to pull it out, get that right in the center, and that's where we're going to want to be when we reinstall it. Make sure it's working. And now we're ready to reinstall. So if you're wondering, our detent bearing and spring that we took out earlier, this is where it hits. It's going to turn, but when it gets to this little opening, the bearing catches it. And that's where the detent is. So that's why the bearing and spring need to be out of there, or you could lose it. Now, if you wanted to go deeper into here, Keeler describes that there's a tool that you can attach, and by loosening these Allens all the way around it, you can unscrew this. They should be loose now. I've already done it before, but you can unscrew this. But make sure this is on the green filter. And then you can unscrew it and pull it out. You don't need to know this, but that may come in handy in the future. And you can just bypass this whole thing. Pulling that out. And see, there's another bearing in here. You have to be careful about that. That's a detent bearing for your angle. See that under here, there's a little groove. And that's where this pin lines up. And then your detent bearing, this little notch right here is where your detent brings it back into center. So if you have to go in deeper, well, that's what you do. And when you're putting it back on, you're supposed to put this back onto the green filter. And look at your notch placement. The big notch goes on this pin, and place it straight down on that. Then you can screw this locking ring back on. After you screw that on, don't forget to tighten up your Allen screws if you've taken that off. Now we're going to reinsert this. We got to make sure that we're in the center, that our slits operate like they're supposed to. Okay. Now we can reinsert it back into our assembly. If you needed to clean the filters, you could do that here too. We're going to put our slits sideways. Oops, keep it in the center. And going in. So once we're back in, we can put our two Phillips screws back in here. Let's test our slit, make sure it's still working. Everything is working smoothly, so good. we've got that right in the center. Now we can move our gear back over into place, and you can look for your marks, and you see the flat part, you see your marks, and then you can tighten that back up. Whoops. Where's that screw at? Yeah. If you look through the hole, you can see where the other screw, the mark that it made, and then you know you're in the right spot. We'll put that screw back on. Get it nice and tight. Snug. Don't get too tight. Make sure it's working. Everything is still working. Now we can put our detent bearing spring back in. We have our 3mm bearing and our spring and our screw. About flush seems to be good, but we'll test it. See if it's detenting. You can feel it. If it feels like you've gotten that detent, then you know you've done it right. Everything is still working copacetic. Okay, that's about it. If you needed to deal with any of this issue, your diaphragms are there, accessible, and I haven't changed any of these yet, but that could come one day, changing the filter wheel and the diaphragm wheel, but that's pretty deep. Okay, everything is working smoothly. Now we can put it back into our arm. Got to feed the cable in first. And we see where our two holes are for the Allen screws. Try to make sure your surface here is clean so that it will go inside smoothly. And then slide it back in. Hopefully it won't be too hard. It should go in, but if it's been boogered up like this one has from doing it a few times, it might not be going in so smoothly. And it has to go in even. We'll line our screw holes back up. And put our screws back in. And remember, leave them loose. Hopefully you won't have too much of an issue lining everything back up for your screws. And then put your cap back on with the 3 Phillips and your wire harness screw. Time to put it back onto the slit lamp. Remember, you've got this little pin, nylon pin that travels in here, and there's another pin right here that needs to be pushed out of the way. Make sure it's flat, or else this arm is not going to go down. Put your snap ring back on. The other models, if you have your bearing, spring, and Allen screw, those need to go back in order. Put the cover back on. there's a little lip on the bottom of this cover, and there's a corresponding ridge on the bottom here. So you're going to make sure it slides into that. Make sure your rubber grip is high enough so that it can go on. Put your 2 screws in, and while you're screwing it together, turn your dials to make sure they're not rubbing, because they have a little bit of play. They might have a little bit of play, and keep these from rubbing. And then we want to put our bezel rings back on the top and secure those screws. Remember, when you're putting your knobs back on, you want to leave a little space between the knob and the cover, something that will give you a little bit of space while you tighten up the screw. You want to protect your knob with some pliers, with a cover, and set your 0 as it's all the way down. That's going to be your 0 for your slits. Hold it in place, tighten it, check it. You do the top the same way, both sides. You may have to adjust it and then tighten it to get it tight. Get this one side tight, and then you can work with the other side. Your knobs are tight, they're lined up, the lines close, and the detent is right at 90. And when you're putting your little caps back on, remember when you're putting your caps on, there's a little opening in the cap that's going to correspond with the little ridge inside your knob so that it fits right in it. Put all 4 of those in. Once you've put it back on and hooked the power back up, and hopefully you have a test bar, or if you need to put a piece of paper in front of your chin rest so you can shine the light. And remember, we left these a little loose, Allens. When it's there, if it's not centered and it needs to go left or right a little bit, see what you can adjust by turning your tower here. It'll turn just a little bit because you left them loose, and just to get it best you can back in the center. And then you can tighten those Allens back up. When it comes to fine-tuning the alignment of the light source on the SL-B2, there's a lot of movement you can get underneath here. If you take this hood off, there's 2 Phillips screws, one on each side. Take the hood off, and that gives you access to the prism plate. It's got a number of screws around it. It's got 4 larger Allen screws and then 3 smaller adjusting screws. You're going to need a 0.9 for the 3 smaller ones and a 1.3 mil or 050 for the larger ones. And what you need to do is loosen the 4 outer ones, and you can see there's gaps around them so it can turn. So if your light needs to go horizontally, you need to change it. You could just loosen the screws a little bit and turn the prism head to line it up and then tighten it down. If you need to go vertically, can leave these screws tight and see if just by moving the small screws up or down, see if that's enough. It's usually not very much, so it's possible that you can tweak it just by tightening and loosening to make the light go up and down. But if they're not going to move, then go ahead and loosen those up and do your adjustment vertically with these up and down. You'll see what happens when you screw them in and out. And when you're done, you just go ahead and recheck your horizontal, tighten the 4 screws if you loosened them, and then you might want to put something on, like some glue or something, to keep the screws from loosening. And then you can put your hood back on and your 2 Phillips screws. I just wanted to show you some paperwork about the tweaking process. You'll see your screws. If what I said didn't make sense, maybe this will make more sense.